Welcome to the road to 1 million US dollars. Let's get right into the Bitcoin chart for today, starting on this 4-hour time frame for Bitcoin, because right now we are bleeding to the downside after invalidating this symmetrical triangle pattern that I talked about yesterday. Now, in yesterday's video, I talked about this breakout and said that I didn't have a lot of confidence in this breakout because we only had those confirmed candle closes, but not a retest yet. And we didn't really have any volume in the market. So in the end, this thing just ended up invalidating. One thing I did do though is that once we invalidated this pattern, I opened a short position and this led to a nice 124% profit on that trade. So why did I close this short position? Even though technically speaking, we are still in this downtrend here for Bitcoin. Well, this is partially because if we take a look at the Fibonacci retracement levels, you can see that right here, we are actually exactly at this 1.618 Fibonacci level, sitting at about 97,000 US dollars. So yes, technically speaking, this trend is still down, but I just wanted to lock in those gains, realize those profits instead of just hoping for another bigger move to the downside. I'll get to another reason why I actually closed the position perhaps a little bit early later on in this video when we take a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat maps. But apart from that, let's just stick to this analysis here. So far, like I said, technically in downtrend, and therefore we should expect there to be more downside, although I am getting ready for a potential long position sometime soon here once we start getting some bullish reversal signals starting to show up, and basically Bitcoin is showing some signs of bottoming out. Obviously, I cannot tell you if that is going to be at 97k or it's actually going to be at 90k. So for now, like I said, this thing is just moving down. We have to wait for some kind of low to actually form before we can start talking about longing Bitcoin again. Now, of course, there's still massive opportunity on the lower time frames as well, just taking advantage of some of that volatility on those lower time frames. So, of course, I'm still keeping an eye on that and basically just trading those lower time frames. Next, let's actually take a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, because this was one of the reasons why I actually closed my short position. Starting on this 3-day time frame, what you can see is that we still have a little bit of liquidity to the downside here, as low as about 96k, but we're talking about very, very small amounts of liquidity. You can see that right here, for example, on the 3-day time frame, we had about $160 million worth of long positions that got liquidated. But if we now look to the downside, the biggest pocket to the downside on that 3-day time frame is only 90 million. And then at 96k, we're talking about $50 million worth of long positions. And that is frankly just a very small amount of liquidity. Same thing here on this 2-week time frame. So zoomed out a little bit, you can see that we actually just took out a big pocket of liquidity, but there is still very little liquidity to the downside, while there is a decent amount of liquidity to the upside here. So we have about $200 million sitting at 104k, and we have again $250 million sitting at 102k for the Bitcoin price. And typically the Bitcoin price gets attracted to where there is the most liquidity on this chart. Therefore, I wanted to get out of the way of that, even if there is potentially some more downside left. However, one thing we should really take into consideration here is actually the 1-year time frame. What you may notice is that on this highest time frame, there is some liquidity to the upside, but most of the liquidity is sitting at about 89,000 US dollars. So 89k from this point that I'm recording this video would already be another, let's say, 8% move to the downside. And if we're talking about a total move to the downside, it would be about a 15% correction from this top that we saw here recently. So to kind of summarize this Bitcoin liquidation heat map, in this area right here, there isn't a lot of liquidity. However, at about 90,000 or like 89k, roughly speaking, there is actually a decent amount of liquidity. So perhaps, technically speaking, it could be the case that we actually come down that low to actually grab all of that liquidity. But to be fair, I mean, if we look at the state of the charts at that point, if we get a pullback all the way down here, we would already be undercutting this low and this low right here. So it would really start to look pretty bearish at that point, in my personal opinion. But either way, for now, that is simply not the case. So I'm not really going to worry about it just yet. And instead, I'm just going to wait and see what actually happens in this short-term downtrend here, and where we actually end up finding some kind of bottom. And one last thing I want to keep repeating here in this video is that technically the trend is down for Bitcoin. So we are in a bearish trend here in the short term. And I am not going to be considering any kind of long position here until we get some kind of clear reversal signal. Like perhaps it could be a break of this trend, or Bitcoin cools off a little bit. Perhaps it starts to form a base around these lows, or whatever may happen. We might end up going deeper. But my point is that it is very risky to be entering into any kind of long so long as we have not found a bottom at this point. Okay, so hopefully I made my point clear. Of course, it is not financial advice, but I just want to warn you guys against just longing against the trend here on leverage, because that is a very risky thing to do. Trading with leverage is already risky as it is, but if you're trading against the trend, then that is even more risky, of course. Lastly, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin ETF flow tables. Unfortunately, I do not have any data for Monday just yet. The inflows and outflows are always 24 hours late. So therefore, of course, tomorrow I am going to update you guys once again with what these Bitcoin ETF investors are actually doing. Either way, this has been today's market update. If you want to join the Road to 1 Million community on Discord, you can do so completely for free, simply with the link in the video description. But regardless, if you do end up joining or not, thank you for watching once again, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one.